Hello and welcome everyone. This is going to be a quick announcement before we get started with the video. We have a current promotion going on. If you join our Discord link, you'll get free access for a complete week. No gimmicks, no signups necessary. It's completely free. You'll also get a 12-hour tape reading course sent to you via DM. So don't miss out. Link is going to be in the description. This is a limited time deal only. So don't miss out. If you've been looking at joining the tape reading chat room or learning more about tape reading, it's a great opportunity without any cost.
This conference will now be recorded.
All right, welcome to Level 2, Lesson 1. And as always, everything that we're going to be talking about today is for educational purposes only, and nothing is intended as any type of investment advice. All right, so we kind of just got the prints that we've been looking for, and ironically, we have our class and we have some controlling prints in the pre-market. So we're going to kind of just jump right into things. Today's class is going to be strictly on finding controlling prints and making our calculations that are acceptable for a trade from them. All right, so we're coming up. We got to look at our print personality. Looking at MDAI. So we can see that, there's definitely some nice bursts out there. We're really looking right around an area, right around a print personality of 5. So it definitely has no lack of ability to be able to print. Now, coming up to the 450 level, you can see that we have a little bit over print personality. All right, so right here, we're going to look at our calculations. It's trading in 50-cent increments. Our expectations from here is just a little bit over 1 increment. So we're looking at right about that 4 level. Now, coming into the 4, we can, it's something that we always want to do, especially when we have our calculations, and see where our calculations match up to things that have previously happened before. And you can see we do have some really strong support that's right at that 4 level. So our acceptable trade is going to be sitting right about 4. And I'm just going to put a line there so we know. Okay, right at this point, that's where an acceptable trade or an acceptable trigger back towards our upside is going to be. All right, what's our price target? Very simple, 5. Conservatively would be back to our prints at that 450 like we talked about yesterday in number 4 trades. But in reality, the real price target, we're looking for them to make about 50 cents off of their prints from 450. Now, we're still obviously in the pre-market right now, but the trade is kind of setting itself up. This is one of those situations, and we've talked about this before. Now, I would have no problem taking it in the pre-market, but if you're not trading during the pre-market, if this is setting itself up, at this point, if the market were to open right now and we were to get a trigger up, is that an acceptable entry to be able to take? Absolutely, because it's doing its work right now in the pre-market. All right, so now I'm just going to kind of start to think about different setups and the ways that they could go about it. Okay, because it's just a little bit over 1 increment. Okay, it would make perfect sense for this to kind of drop as soon as the market opens. As long as we hold right in this kind of this 370 area, we can look right, for it to come right back into there. But we want it to hold within this consolidation. We don't want it breaking under. If it breaks under, we're going to basically move on to look at something else. I consider the print personality as 2 since most of the PM bursts were aggregated during the build phase. Okay, but that's not correct because it's definitely not a 2 print personality. I mean, just look. Most of the bigger prints, you're talking about between 4 and 5 prints. Okay, even some of them more than that. When you're saying aggregated during the build phase, when we're looking at time and sales and we're going back to see what bigger prints look like, what's its print personality? We also have to understand relative to the type of stock it is. Okay. When we look at 450, is this a ton of prints for a $4.50 stock? Not really. So again, what we're looking for is somewhere, kind of in that 8 to 10 area. But why do these hold so much more weight? Pre-market. All right. At any point moving forward, our trigger has hit its monetary spot. But like I said, I would love to see the market open and get a little bit of a drop underneath there just to make it look like it's selling first. They sell, they're able to acquire the shares they're looking for from building from 450, and then we're going to look for it to go back up. Now, there is one thing that I do need to know about this trade. How long can I expect to be in it? Especially if it's going to be one of those trades that comes right out of the beginning of the market. Not very long. Okay, unless as we're coming back up, we start to see a lot of continuation prints that are showing us the ability to really be able to break 5, which buying would have to be coming in way heavier right now. Unless we see that once it makes that quick move, we have to be ready to take off a large portion. Because wouldn't it make perfect sense for them to get their 450, to make their money from 450? And then what happens once they sell if there's no continuation? It's going to be one of those situations where we see a really nice move right from the beginning of the open, and then from there we end up coming right back and taking that big bar back to the downside. So it's something that going into the trade, we have to be ready almost within the same bar, the same minute, to be able to take off of our trade. So something to kind of keep in the back of your mind before the market opens. We have about 3 minutes before we get started. Those 4 bids could help give it that spark. What are these 4 bids? What am I going to have to take them as? So not necessarily short term, because in this scenario, think about it. The stock closed at $2.59 and it made a really large run. Okay, you're talking about over a 50% run. So from there, am I worried about the selling at this moment? Or am I worried about the new buying? Because 4 would be a very logical spot for them to just take off a piece of their position. You'll notice the immediate reaction to it afterwards is we had some pretty decent prints that came in. Nothing spectacular yet, but again, remember, we're still in the pre-market. And it's all about our calculations. Where would I want to have my order set up right now? Perfect. 424. Dollar move, 25 cents maximum loss. Give it the chance to actually come and test the 4 level. So my best case scenario, like I said, I would like to see a nice little, break underneath that 4 first, because it's just going to give us better room to have a better entry. Plus give a little bit of a head fake, get those, retail from the beginning to kind of sell out a bit. And if they're selling off, they can build even quicker. Building even quicker means getting back to where we want to be faster, obviously. You'll notice we have movement right now, but there's no prints yet. Everything's been above the ask, below the bid. Not really showing us a thing yet. Although that's pretty much across the board, but so far, pretty much the biggest thing right here, these bids, but we haven't seen any new buying coming in. Haven't seen anything yet. So we still have our original game plan, original calculations. There's been no trigger. We need to see some type of anything, but again, so this is in this case right now, we're watching them bring it underneath that 4. This is what we were talking about, best case scenario for us to be able to get a better trade. But then bringing it underneath, we have to see building, because the only reason for this stock if it's not going to just die out, is to bring this down right now, has to be building. So we should be seeing more buying coming in this area. A little bit at 385, but not enough to really, not anything that really stands out yet. But notice how when we're talking about this right now, we're not talking about what happened on the chart or anything that's going on. Everything is based off of the prints we're seeing. Four is not an easy level, but we can see that how well respected it was breaking past. Not easy to get back up above, but we're going to have to see some type of prints. 2 prints at 4, obviously not going to do anything. A little bit here, a little bit there, but nothing at 4 that changes anything or really gives any more to it. Just a bunch of kind of random prints at the moment. Notice as we're watching, have we really seen any alignment on the overall game plan versus the shorter term game plan? Not really. Based off the amount of volume that we see coming in this, obviously this is one of those stocks that everyone was looking at. So we should be expecting to see multiple market makers that are actually trading this. We have our original at 450, which gives us our pullback to 4, and then our move back to the upside. But at this point, we should first of all see that person should have been building at this point. Would have liked to see a lot heavier prints coming in, but then also just some shorter term buyers that are aligning for an actual move back towards that upside. And as we noticed, right now we're still on the original, nothing has changed the original game plan, but nothing's come to support it yet either. Still nothing really special in the prints yet. Nothing that's really standing out at all. Our print personality is definitely thinned out, so it's going to take a little bit less than it would have taken, but still, being in such a congested level right now, we still haven't seen, like I said, any type of alignment. So it really still relies on just the prints that we have from our original game plan. Nothing has changed yet. We haven't got anything that's really adding to the trade. We have not gotten anything that really subtracts from it. It's just kind of eh. Well, I mean, I shouldn't even call it a trade yet because we haven't seen our trigger, but you understand what I mean. If it triggered here with buying in the teens, would you take an entry or no because we haven't seen build? I'd absolutely take an entry because look at everything that's going on. I mean, volume's still high. It's just because print personality is staying thin, which is odd because there are orders out there, but because it's staying thin like that, there's a lot that they can be doing during this time period. So I still have the prints at 450. Nothing's came in to say that that's not there. So absolutely. Would trigger have to be around 500K? Yeah, I mean, right in that area. 400. All right, so it's either now or never. Okay, what I want to see now is I want to start to see that building, and I want to start to see them coming closer to time for it to be able to release. Otherwise, it's not even going to be worth watching. Okay, that's the second time that they've pulled that. So anyone that was buying because of the way that it went in, okay, once we pull underneath that 4, they should be able to start building quicker. Volume's still consistently high, so we shouldn't be waiting much longer for it to actually be able to make its move. Especially considering that pretty much from almost 8 o'clock until 9:30, they had all the time in the world to do what they needed to do. See, this is one of those situations where because we know our calculations, hey, we can just put an order up here right around, let's say 41.21 in that area, have it ready, and we can be watching other things at the same time because we already know exactly what we need to see. So far, we're not really seeing much of a change within the prints. It's really just consolidated. Little buy here, little sell there. If you notice, everything that we're determining right now, we're looking straight at our prints, not worried about what's going on over here on the chart. All right, what do we see forming here? What do we have forming right here? Volume dip. So we got our order, make sure that we're ready. And this is pretty much, if we come out of this and we don't get our move, then again, like I said, we can set an order and then we'll move on to something. But see, that's the thing about having our calculations is we already know exactly where our order needs to come in and exactly what it needs to do. So that's all we're looking for. There's nothing else in this that we have to worry about. Obviously, we want to see, other prints coming in. We're going to keep an eye on it, but knowing exactly what we need to do, there's no thinking involved here. What do we notice about when it came out of its volume pattern? If we look at it coming out of the volume pattern, what do we notice? Look where it starts, comes down into waning, and then we come out almost exactly. Just a lack of substance at the moment. See how we came out and really no follow through here? Really like to see prints for it to be able to break this orb line. Still nothing that really jumps out. Now, 14, 16, lot better. Now, something that's changed within here, okay? We can look back in the beginning of the morning and we know it made this big original move and it was trading in 50-cent increments. Is it trading 50 cents right now? It's not. So what's going to happen print-wise? Okay, these 14s and 17s would have meant a lot more earlier this morning. Oh, where are we? Okay, but how much weight do they actually hold in the current climate? Because remember, everything's relative. So how much weight are they actually holding compared to how it's trading now? Do they hold as much weight? Much less. It's still good. Don't get me wrong. It's still over print personality. It's definitely what we want to see. But just remember, because it's coming into smaller increments now, it's going to take a lot more of prints like this to even get it close to being able to come to 5. We're really kind of coming up to that 450 where the original market maker is. What should we think about doing with our position here? Based off of everything we've seen so far. Print-based decisions. You think it's a good idea to take some profit right underneath this 450? Absolutely. Again, we're doing it's doing our calculations. It's just to be able to get to that 5, it's going to take so much more now. So coming up to where we know there's a definite market maker, I'm going to lock in some right now. especially considering the fact it's not like we have so much buying. We're looking for this to go to 750 or 10. We're only talking about from 450 another 50 cents. So when we start to think about this situation and just what we've seen coming into it, knowing it's going to take way more, which we haven't been seeing, we want to, when it coming up to this 450, take profit. What percent to lock in? Well, that depends. Depends when your entry was. Depends. There's a bunch of different things. What do you think? I'd say more 40% in that area. I'm still going to leave more than half. So if 30 to 40% in that, that general spot, because as we're coming closer to 450 again, just remember, are we really getting any type of new prints to get us further past this 450 where the market maker is? Do we see any alignment within these prints right now? So yes, I know overall, technically it told us it wants to go to 5, but at this moment, I'm not seeing that. And it's not like there's enough rate. It's not like we're $2 up in this. I mean, one bar to the downside brings us down to 410 in a second. 445, those are beautiful prints. They're just not attached to anything though. We know 450 is going to be somewhat of an issue. Now we have some more 450 prints, a little bit less than last time. This is a great example of how we didn't really get the great buying or the shorter term alignment, but did we ever get anything within the prints that told us this was no longer a trade? Did we get anything that changed the original percentage? None, right? Nothing. So what do we have to fall back into? The original game plan. Yeah, this is a nasty area. Once these type of prints start leaking out, anything could happen, especially if you don't have the buying. But obviously 450 told us it needs to pull back a bit based off of hitting it again. And then we'll continue to look for our move back up. And just something else to, I want to add to why we would take off at that 450. Technically, even though 5 is our price target, where are we really going to have to look at this stock very closely? Well, I'm 450 without a shadow of a doubt, but breaking past 450, what do we actually have here? Look at the resistance up here. 480, where we know market makers like to start managing their positions, has a double top already. So we're going to be coming up to a triple top when we get there. Not the easiest spot to be able to just break. So when we're taking, managing at 450, technically we have another 30 cents to the upside, but is that 30 cents worth taking 30 cents to the downside? And in my opinion, the answer is no. That's why we lock in 40, 30, 40%, a larger portion of that trade, even though it has more room. 450, we know the original market makers there were going to have those games, so on and so forth. So we have to think about those things as we're managing it. But notice that everything that we're talking about right now has nothing to do with the chart. It's not just because it's at 450, it's the reasons why it's at 450. Knowing the market makers there, knowing we didn't have great alignment, knowing we're not really seeing shorter term continuation. We only have the controlling prints. That's why we're managing some of it. On top of the fact, knowing it's got to pull back a bit because it printed at 450 again. Continue to watch our prints. We could see just a bunch of kind of want to start to see some buying coming in here because if not, look at what we have again. Statistically speaking, the stock isn't just going to stop trading, so we're coming back into a volume dip. From that volume dip, we can expect volume to come out. A break to the downside, not look, is obviously not what we want to see, but we're not seeing any type of shorter term buying to come in to show us to break out of this consolidation yet. So at that moment, I'd be looking to take up off a little bit more to reduce the exposure for when a volume breakout does come. If it is to the downside, I don't have as much of my position I'm holding. Yeah, see? And that's exactly why. See, we can anticipate before that even happened. We're in this consolidation. We have no shorter term that's showing us we need to pull up over 450 right now. 450 have shown building. We have our volume pattern where we know we're going to get a bar of volume out of. We have to reduce the exposure because of this exact type of bar that was pretty much telegraphed to us that it was coming. Now, guess what? If the bar goes to the upside, perfect. We go with on our trade. But is this not a great way to get a lot of people out of the trade quickly? Notice we didn't break that 4 level though. Yeah, well, not only do we have a print line there, but if we look, I mean, remember how strong 4 actually was during the pre-market as well. So let me ask you a question here. Would that have been an acceptable spot to be able to take another trade right here after this quick push down and then trigger back to the upside, pushing into 4 and not hitting. Without a shadow of a doubt, but why? Why would that have been okay? There's a specific reason. It gave us a new trade. Did it not? Not only did it make 450, the position at 450 stronger, but from 450 ask, pull back to the exact calculation, pushes in, doesn't hit, and trigger back to the upside. If anything, I mean, not for nothing, but because this was in a consolidation, this is right here is where our entry was. Okay, so a little bit underneath 4. Okay, but this had actually more variables to add to it, didn't it? So even though this was a high percentage trade, this was an even higher percentage trade. But as we know, that 450 area, that's where the main dominant market maker is working right now, and it is not an easy area. But see why it's so important, guys, for us to anticipate where the actual trade is going to be? Yeah, I keep doing that, Milan. I have it up on a different screen, and I'm watching the time and sales on that screen, and I forget about this one. Here we go. But here, going back to what I was just talking about, our anticipation, do you see how important the anticipation really is? Because in this scenario, if we wait until we're out, around 450, look what ends up happening. Compared to when the actual trigger comes and we know our calculations and we're ready for our calculations, look how much room we've had to play. Even with this crazy bar, it didn't ever actually even hit our stop loss. So do you see where anticipation comes into play here? This same trade, by hesitating an extra 10 seconds, turns into something completely different. And when we're taking trades down here, we're leaving ourselves lots of room for them to play up here versus taking them up here. Look what we get ourselves involved with. Is this the prettiest trade of the day? Probably not. But does it fit calculations? It's a bit of an ugly stock too. No question, it is not a pretty stock with at all. But if we do things correctly with our calculations, are we still able to trade it without any problem of how ugly it is? Are we still getting high percentage trades out of it? Absolutely. It's ugly because of the chart, but the actual prints themselves are beautiful. Well, to a certain extent. The controlling prints, so that the other prints haven't been that great. The shorter term prints coming into it. But that's really a large reason of why it's so ugly, is because a lot of this is being controlled by just the controlling prints themselves. If we had short term traders in this stock, the stock would already be at 5 without any question. Rich, it might sound rhetorical, but when the bars aren't as big as the pre-market, is that when you zoom in to get accurate increments? Yeah, well, I pretty much get rid of anything doesn't pertain to what's actually happening. This bar up this morning, to me, just doesn't mean anything. Basically, what it says is that it traded for 3 minutes like that out of every minute it's traded today. So I get rid of that. I have no interest in it because that's not a real view into how this stock actually trades. You know what I'm saying? if you notice, okay, our 4 from where our calculations are, after it's triggered, has it ever broke? We get our volume pattern, perfect amount of volume out of the volume pattern right here. Since then, even on these crazy bars, look what happens. Again, anticipation being so important because does this affect us when we do things the right way? And when we trade our calculations and anticipate our calculations? No, this crazy bar would have been like, oh shit, oh, okay, it's back. Because you have the room. When if we're waiting and we're hesitating and taking it on the second or third, now we're in, the Shark Tank. This is just getting nasty. $4.70, another 30 cents. Well, technically, because it hit $4.50 more than once, it does have the ability to break past 5. But now this is just getting, crazy. But again, if we're not involved in the craziness because of doing things the right way, making our calculation and working that calculation. Come back, you see some 430s were pretty decent. 66, 67, not bad. 65, not terrible. 60, pretty decent. So there is definitely still buying up here. It's just the way they're going about taking their shares is pretty crazy. But again, if we notice something, we haven't seen a ton of short term in here. So they're making drastic moves. Like I said, if we just had some follow through and shorter term traders coming into this, we would have been at 5 early this morning. But there's just not a ton of short term, so they're having to make drastic moves to take shares from retail. But again, is that changing anything with our calculation? So it's as crazy as the stock looks and as crazy as these bars are actually getting. When we follow our calculations, it puts us in a spot that we don't typically have to worry about those type of things. It's the difference between getting shaken out for 30 cents and not having to touch your position. There's a huge difference there. Do we have any questions so far? You'll notice something is that the clarity that we get by making everything print-based decisions takes away all of this nonsense. So yeah, it's definitely was drastic in the way that it pushed and moved and so on and so forth. But overall, in reality, all that stuff that happened doesn't affect us because of the clarity of, again, print-based decisions. Would you let the stock stay on a back burner to finish or pick a spot and exit? Honestly, once it pushed up past 450, look at these bars that you started getting. Honestly, I just don't want to be involved in it anymore. So out of the dollar, I'll take, 60 cents as always. Because, this is just, look at it. It was fine in the beginning until we saw it start acting like this, but at the same time, it still has a lot of room to the upside. So I'm going to keep an eye on it. It's just I probably would have taken off a lot after it made that push back towards the upside just because it's like I said, it's just getting nasty. Again, though, you're going to get one of those bars at some point that really, like I said, it has the ability to go over 5 now because of how many times it's came and bought at that 450. But again, if you're not already in this stock, what are the chances of getting a very clean entry right now? Well, it's definitely not 0, but it's not great. Just look at what's happening. You might get a great trigger bar here, but Not for nothing. Does anyone want to trade anywhere in this consolidation? No. So I would have to basically would have to hit 450 again. It would have to pull back down to the 4 area, and I would just duplicate the same thing that you could have done twice. But I'm not touching it in this area. That's just, I mean, that's a suicide mission. That's why getting the right entry is very important. But when we make our calculations correct, okay, we should be getting in on the ground floor of these trades, which save us a lot of headaches. And it gives us room to actually allow the stock to make its move. Not a huge trade, definitely not the prettiest trade, but was it a high percentage trade? And that's the key. Not the biggest, not the prettiest, but was it high percentage? Absolutely. And that's all that matters. I can't control that a stock starts getting crazy after I get into it. I mean, that's just not something that I can, it just is what it is. I can control where I get into it, though. That helps prevent getting involved in this. I don't mind being involved in it when I have room to play with, but once you get in and it starts doing something like this, it's almost like you have to get out, because how am I going to be able to control a loss in that? The first one was a little bit less than 80. Coming in, I mean, the volume pattern being perfect, it probably could have given 5% to that, but the second one by far. Okay, because this one you're talking about pushing into 4, not hitting. You have the print line there. You know that it's a extremely strong level. So with those added variables into it, the second trade was actually a higher percentage trade than the first one was. Which was over 80%. Although not for nothing, this one did put us in a better spot. It was just a little bit lower, but either way. And if you'll notice, again, a high percentage trade, even it doesn't come back to test it. It's a true trigger. All right, again, any questions on how we came up with exactly what our calculations are? And this is going to be every trade. The reason I didn't want to use, I was going to use Tesla, but we talk about Tesla almost every single day. Well, obviously, it's an everyday stock. But, being that it had earnings yesterday, I know there were going to be a lot of prints. I want you guys to be able to see that it only takes, it doesn't have to be Tesla. Yeah, Tesla's going to trade and it's going to have prints. But how hard were the calculations on MDAI? I mean, was it hard to make those? It's simple, right? And then once we have our calculations, we just have to work our trade within their plan. It's that simple. This is every trade we're going to look for. Now, this is an easier one too, because we didn't even have to think about taking a number one trade just because you can't. But in all reality, I mean, technically, once we came up to this 450 and it told us it needs to pull back 4, there's 50 cents there to be made. Would I suggest it? No, because technically it was going to happen quickly. And if it's going to happen quickly, we would look for the trade towards the print. How much did you assign to the second entry pushing into the print line 4 and bouncing off and triggering? How much? Well, print line, how much do we add for a print line? %, right? Okay. Pushing in and not hitting and then triggering up immediately. How much a percentage do we put to that? Oh, 15's definitely too high. Depending on how much it gets rejected, I put between 5 and 10% on that. Okay. And then we know we have a print line here. We know 4 is a psych level, but I also would add, look how strong this level is. So is that going to be a good support level for an entry? Okay, I would give that another, I personally give that another 5%. Now, this push, okay, I'm coming closer to 10% on this because look at this push down. I mean, it was flying towards 4. It just got stonewalled and immediately rejected from it. That's a perfect case scenario of pushing into something, not hitting. So we're talking about how many percent? What's it all add up to? 10, 5, and 5. That's 20 extra percent. Did we have 60% in prints? Yes. Did we have a 10% trigger? Yes. So we're talking about a 90 plus percent trade. I mean, it fit a lot of different variables. That's the thing. When we're getting to a point where we just have so many variables, I don't even like keep counting anymore. It's just okay, perfect. It's a trade now. All right, guys, I hope we all learned something today. Hopefully, we're learning that calculations are very simple, very easy, and just give us a guideline of exactly how to fit our trade within their trade. All right, guys, class at 3 p.m. I will see you all there. The rest I'll see you all in the chat, and happy trading.